Hi, I'm Jennifer Allen, reporting for RSNA News. I'm talking with Dr. Achala Vagal, a radiology professor and vice chair of research at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. As the fight against COVID-19 continues, Dr. Vagal is the corresponding author of a recent radiology study discussing the pandemic's impact on radiology research. Thank you, Dr. Vagal, for joining me today.
Thank you, Jennifer, for having me.
What are the main ways COVID-19 has impacted radiology research?
Yeah, that is actually exactly what we were trying to answer in our article that we had written. And it was actually a bunch of us, from 6 different institutions, including UK, where, we all shared what and how this has kind of, transpired since the COVID-19 hit our doorstep. Pretty much the main thing was that all universities halted the research. And the only research that was allowed during, the acute pandemic time, if I may, was the critical research. That was COVID research or essential research, which was maybe an experimental drug or treatment, was important for that patient. But other than that, if it did not fit that criteria, universities basically halted the research, and all of us, the vice chairs and all research personnel, had to stop the research, figure out how we are going to take all this research virtual if we can, halt all clinical trials, again, which were not critical or essential. And I have to say that was very, very difficult because suddenly, and this all happened, as all of us know very well, within a week, we had to do all this. And not only just us, but I'm pretty sure everybody who's listening, everybody has gone through this in a global way, to just shut down the research suddenly without knowing where and how this will impact us. So I think that big uncertainty was the biggest factor in the very beginning. And I think the main thing was that the pace was not only halted, we didn't know when it'll start. Now that it is starting, it's still this uncertainty is still very much there amongst all researchers.
So now that the research has started up again, what are the biggest challenges that are really facing researchers?
Yeah, and that's another what we had actually, again, kind of brainstormed, and we realized everyone was in the same boat. But I would say the 3 biggest impact or 3 biggest challenges that the COVID-19 has put on us is, number 1 is loss of productivity. And what that means is the 3 to 4 months of a almost near complete shutdown meant loss of productivity of 1 to 2 years for a research lab, for a research personnel. The number 2 is the financial implications, right? So we know that now most of the radiology clinical departments have not only recovered, we are even doing more than what we were doing pre-COVID, because it's that the clinical part of it that was stopped is now recovering. But I cannot say that's the same for research, because the financial implications of the clinical revenue going down meant and means that there is a hiring freeze. There is the capital budget that has been cut and or severely minimized, which means research equipment, research personnel, whether hiring new people or even retaining the talent that we have. So the financial implications, I think, is the second biggest. And the third, I think the impact is just to get back into the game. So that means that if you think about it, the clinical trials which were stopped, to begin them again, that's a big period. So I would say those are the 3 big challenges that we see.
Can you talk a little bit about what's going on at the University of Cincinnati? How is the research kind of starting back up again at your institution?
So at the University of Cincinnati, basically, we had a research re-entry plan from the June 1st. That's where the university allowed us to go back and open up the labs. And this was university-wide. Each one, the vice chair and the PIs had to make a research re-entry detailed plan, which means that the labs could not be at more than 50% density. And even now that is the case, because now that the campus has opened up, the main campus, which is very near to our hospital system, we are still dealing with a lot of students basically coming in. So the research is still at 50% density. I have to say that one of the biggest pluses of this was, like other institutions, we have a huge COVID innovation task force. So the COVID research is is basically progressing at a great rate. And so radiology is involved with some of the data collection, some of the image repositories. So that piece is going well. And also we have started our clinical trials back. Patients are being scanned again for research, and we are submitting grants again. I think the momentum is slowly but surely picking up, but we are also doing still a lot of our work virtually. So I would say at least 50% of our research personnel, if they can, are still working virtually and being very productive. So I would say that we are making slow but very steady progress, and we already have a long-term strategic plan as to how we are going to deal with this, because Jennifer, COVID is not going anywhere for at least a year till we have an effective vaccine. Mm-hmm. So this is more than just this summer or fall. I think that's what at UC we are definitely looking at the long term, how we are going to plan on this.
Well, and that kind of segues to my final question, which is really, how do you think the pandemic has impacted the future of radiology research? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think that's $1 million question. And the short answer is nobody knows what the future will hold and how we are all going to change, including radiology research. What I know for sure, that what I like to call is, whether we are playing the finite game or the infinite game, Simon Sinek's famous book, the more recent one is The Infinite Game. And I think that's exactly what we are doing. We actually have new rules of the game and a new level, play fields. And so we have to adapt. As a research community, we have to adapt. I'll tell you, one of the biggest pros of this COVID pandemic in the research world that I thought, and I think is going to continue in the future, is open science collaboration. I mean, we saw the number of papers that came out, scientists around the world coming together. I think that kind of a collaboration and dissemination of science, I definitely see that as a future for our research. And I think the other important piece is that we will have to think out of the box. How are we going to deal with this? Of course, we are going to be slow as we are starting up, but I feel that we have to have a long-range planning, almost redesigning what we think. The other big thing is, of course, RSNA is a huge part of it, is the image data sharing, right? The image repositories. Again, I think we have been talking about it for a long time, but since COVID, I think it has gained tremendous momentum. So I'm hoping that the future of radiology research is exactly going to be this, is take what we have learned, but then go with a great speed, and somehow I think we're going to come out stronger. So I'm the glass full, overfull, just like spilling over optimistic, because I think that's the only way to deal with this.
So is there anything that the research industry itself can do to kind of facilitate moving forward, helping with these long-term plans at this point?
Yeah, I think, again, collaboration with the academia and industry has never been more important than now. One of the greatest examples, although not specifically towards research, but if you think about the 3D printing and how industry and academia came together and basically figured out how to create those PPEs and give an answer to the most acute needs. I think somehow we have to come together similarly, where the way academic institutions are hurting, I think industry is hurting. So almost like we have to come together as ever before, closer partners. And what specifically I think we'll have to do, that's going to be more, again, conversations, honest conversations with both parties, and figure out what is it that we can do together. But I can tell you that the collaboration has to start with very honest, open conversations. But again, I have full confidence. We are already talking to some of our industry partners, and I see that there is a desire for both parties to meet, even more strategically in this era.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Vagal, for your time today.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Bye.
For updates and the latest scientific research, guidelines, and consensus statements about COVID-19, visit rsna.org/COVID-19. And as always, you can find more radiology news at rsna.org/news.